What will an orphan who had just newly relocated to his rich uncle's house in the village do when he finds out that mad people burst in and out of the rooms in the house, while the owners of the house seem cool about it? Bongani, a 16-year-old boy, had his hope shattered when he lost his only surviving parent, his mother. His father had died before he was born, and his mother had taken on the reins of single parenting, which she did perfectly well. She didn't remarry after her husband's death. Bongani was her only child. After her husband's death, only one of her husband's family sent her money regularly to support her. Other family members stayed away. She loved the man for his gesture and had spoken highly of him many times before Bongani. Bongani would listen in admiration and looked forward to a day he would meet this nice uncle of his. He was a petty trader who was good with sales. She wasn't rich, but she had enough to take care of herself and her son. Suddenly, she died in the marketplace. It was rumored that she had stayed on a charm in her shed. She was ill and hearty before she left for the market. Whatever the cause of her death was, there was no concrete evidence to nail anyone. Bongani had to face the harsh realization of being an orphan. He cried a million tears as family members arranged her burial. Only 3 of her mother's people had shown up, and they showed Bongani great care for the 3 days they were there. On the 3rd day, they had a family meeting. The family elder had instructed that one of the women present take Bongani into her house, but she came up with the excuse that her husband wouldn't agree. The other 2 women gave their excuses, and just when they were dragging on the matter, a village messenger came into the living room. After greetings, he told them that Mr. Amari, his rich uncle, had asked for Bongani to be brought with a promise that he would take care of him and send him to school. The other family members wanted to hesitate, but Bongani informed them that he had been there for them since his father died, and his mother used to speak highly of him. Seeing his desire to go with the messenger, they agreed. The women smiled with relief. The messenger was given a hospitable welcome. He slept in the house, and early the next day, he proceeded on his journey with Bongani. Bongani, excited but still missing his mother, took her books. Mother had a practice of writing down life lessons she had learned in a book. Bongani wanted to keep her lessons with him, prompting the decision to take her books. Off they went on a horse. The journey lasted for 8 hours, and in the evening, a big, attractive, yet deserted house was staring at Bongani. Bongani had an eerie feeling as he entered. There was something unsettling about the environment. The house had the aesthetics, but something was odd. It felt too quiet. Bongani had heard tales about how the houses of rich people teemed with people. His uncle's presence interrupted his thoughts. Mr. Amani, a tall, broad-chested 55-year-old man with a calm look, hugged Bongani, welcomed him to his house. He spoke words of comfort to him and promised him he would be there for him. Mr. Amani went into the kitchen to bring him food and asked that surprised Bongani, because he thought he would have maids in the house. The food was a delicious plate of pounded yam and bushmeat. Bongani ate to his heart's delight, putting aside his thoughts and doing justice to the plate of rich and delicious food before him. After he was done, Mr. Amani told him to go have a nap, as he must be tired from his long journey. Just as he was about to leave the living room, Mr. Amani called him back and said, "Bongani, whatever you see here will not hurt you. Get into the flow," he said. and went into the adjoining room, leaving Bongani confused. He had wanted to ask about his cousins. His mother had told him he had 2 boys and he looked forward to seeing them. He couldn't see Mr. Amani till the next day. Neither did he see his 2 sons. The next day, around 10 a.m., while Bongani sat confused on his bed, wondering why the house was so quiet and he had no one to talk to. Even Mr. Amani had not been seen by him since last evening. The lady had brought him food in their room. He was shocked because he didn't hear footsteps of when she came, but he shoved it off, telling himself he was lost in thought. He ate the food and went to the kitchen to wash his plates. He had expected to see the lady there because he had concluded the house had a maid, and it just must have been the maid who served him. He looked around, but there was no maid in sight. This house is too big. She is probably in a corner in the house. So he went from room to room. Then he passed by a room he had passed by the previous day when he came. It was empty the previous day, but to his shock, he saw large tubers of yam that ran into thousands. The sight was so massive that he opened his mouth agape. When were these brought in? Just then, someone tapped him from behind. It was Mr. Amani. Bongani, what are you doing here? Anyway, my sons are in the living room. They are waiting for you, he said, and left the room. Slowly, still shocked, Bongani went into the living room and saw 2 young men in their 20s sitting together on the chair. Bongani greeted them. They responded. Bongani was happy to see his handsome cousins. They were an epitome of beauty and they greeted him well. But something was off about them. They stared into space rather than having eye contact with him. They talked at the same time. Mr. Amani was watching them all along. Before Bongani could say Jack, Mr. Amani interrupted the moment and told him he wanted to show him his farm. Mr. Amani was known to own the biggest house and farm in the village. He harvested many tubers of yam every week, yet no one knew his workers. No workers have ever been seen on his farm except him and his 2 sons. The farm was well fenced. The villagers had always wanted to see how the effort of just 3 people would result into lorries of yams being taken away from the farm daily. It was a wonder. It was rumored that Mr. Amani was into fetishism, but since he helped people a lot, the rumor died a natural death. He took Bongani to his farm and showed him his large expanse of farm. To Bongani's delight, Bongani wanted to be rich as him, so he listened to him with delight as he showed him his farm. Mr. Amani was such a motivational speaker. He usually repeated one thing in his word: there is no amount of money you can't have if you understand paying the price. Bongani loved his talks. However, that unsettling feeling didn't leave him. Every day, he would open his mother's book to read her words of wisdom. His mother had many written accounts on ill-gotten wealth and how one should stay far from it. He would read and ruminate. As days passed by, he realized he only saw his 2 cousins just once in every 3 days. They always had that distant look, and they always go to the same places in the house, after which they retire to a room and they don't come out until the next 3 days. The only comforting thing Bongani enjoyed in the house were the mysterious delicacies prepared by the lady from the other day. Bongani has never seen enter or leave the house. She only comes with food whenever I was hungry. Another fascinating thing about the house were his uncle's stories. His uncle delighted in taking him to his properties in the village and telling him stories about how useless one is without money, and money must be made by all means. At first, Bongani enjoyed his motivations, but he had noticed something strange. His dreams on the night of such days always had his mother crying. He had observed that thrice. After trying to figure out what could be the cause, he picked his mother's book and was scanning through the pages. Just when he wanted to flip a page over, a line drew his attention. Destruction is always the lot of those who seek money from fetishism. It struck a chord in him. He went on to read more and found out his mother's teachings negated what Mr. Amani had been teaching him. It dawned on him that his teachings had been wrong. He noticed that an unhealthy urge to make excessive wealth had rested with him since he came to Mr. Amani's house. To bed thinking about money. He woke up thinking about money. He began to feel uneasy about the house. One night, he woke up from his room to ease himself. That was the first time he would go out to ease himself in the middle of the night since he got there. When he wanted to open his room to get back, a flash saw a madman rush out of the room that always had tubers of yam. He staggered back in fear and later decided to follow the direction the madman went, tiptoeing. On getting outside, he didn't see anyone. He stood there, confused. Just then, Mr. Amari came from behind him. "You don't have to be scared. He comes here to eat when he is hungry," he said. Bongani turned back in shock. "A madman eats in your house?" "Well, a rich man is a friend to all and sundry," Mr. Amani said. Bongani made up his mind that day to leave the house, but he had to plan carefully as he had no place to go. One Sunday afternoon, the village messenger had come to the house to give an urgent message to Mr. Amani. A message so urgent that Bongani had to go to the farm to tell Mr. Amani. Mr. Amani had once warned him not to come to the farm except with him, but since he had taken him there many times, he didn't see the big deal in going there. On getting to the farm, the very tall gate of the farm was locked. He peeped. He knew Mr. Amani was there because he had known his schedule and where he usually was at every time of the day. He couldn't peep as the gate had no loophole in it. He stood facing the gate with anger. A knowing occurred within him that something evil was going on in the compound. Just before his very eyes, a large thunder struck and the gate before him fell flat, and then he saw Mr. Amari seated on a chair in a black robe with two madmen working on his farm. When they had the sound, they stopped. They faced Bongani, who looked shocked himself. On staring at the madmen's faces, they were his cousins, Mr. Amani's sons. Their faces blazed in anger, and boom, they began to chase him. Bongani ran as fast as his legs could carry him. As he ran, he realized his legs were heavy and his pursuers were fast approaching. He screamed out, "Help!" and blacked out. Some days later, I woke back to consciousness, lying in bed with a young man seated beside him, reading the Bible to his unconscious body. He had heard his voice from his subconscious state, and the words that brought him back were powerful words. Words had always brought him back from the path of destruction. First, it was his mother's letters. Secondly, it was the words from a book owned by a religion he would later accept. It turned out that Mr. Amani had died that same day after a failed attempt to catch Bongani, and it had serious spiritual consequences on him. Since then, Bongani took words seriously. He became a Christian because the kind of words they shared were liberating words. His mother's words made him lose interest in Mr. Amani's motivational talks. It was his interest in his words that caused a spiritual rift, which made the place unsettling for him. Mr. Amani had planned to recruit his spirit into an occultic labor, just like he did to his sons. God saved him.